All right. Welcome, everyone, and hello. Welcome to the webinar. My name is Sophie. I'm the Event Strategy Manager here at Vention. So, welcome to our first ever webinar series, Scaling Up with Automation, a guide for small to medium manufacturers. The series consists of three insightful episodes where we'll explore the compelling need for automation in today's manufacturing landscape. We'll guide you through identifying your first automation project and help you build your advanced manufacturing team necessary for success. So whether you're a small business just starting out or looking to enhance your current automation endeavors, this series is your key to thriving in the dynamic world of modern manufacturing. If you have registered for this episode, you will automatically be invited to the next and last episode, which is on February 9th of next week. So the first episode, Market Pressures and Need for Automation, aired last week on January 25th with Joe Wykes and Juan Martinez from Spectre & Co. You can watch it on demand at vention.io/webinars, which I will link in the chat. And on today's episode, we are happy to welcome Kurt Gunnell from Bourns Inc. He's a manufacturing engineer to cover the topic, how to identify your first automation project. So a little bit of what's happening today. I will introduce to you Kurt as well as Mathieu that are on the call today. Mathieu will get started on getting started with your first automation project, and then you will listen to an insightful conversation between Kurt and Mathieu. And the end of the session will be concluded by a Q&A. So we will be taking your questions from the crowd. Feel free to ask your questions during the webinar, and we will address them afterwards. I will send you a reminder as well in order to submit your questions when the webinar is almost over. So for your speakers for today, Mathieu Desmarais here on the call has been operating as the Vice President of Application Engineering at Vention for the past year. He has worked in industrial automation and engineering project management for over 12 years. His expertise lies in technical project management, fabricating and integrating personalized turnkey material handling solution. And at Vention, Mathieu oversees the application engineering department, which consists of the application design team, the customer success team, and the application delivery team. He collaborates tightly with the product team to strengthen and further Vention application roadmap. Welcome, Mathieu.
Thank you.
And Mr. Kurt Gunnell is a seasoned manufacturing and automation engineer at Bourns Inc. Based in Logan, Utah, he previously served for 6 years at Prism View, a Samsung electronics company, and spent over a decade at Young Electric Sign Company as a continuous improvement facilitator and project engineer. Kurt's career started in the automotive industry, manufacturing airbags for cars. After 4 years and finishing his engineering degree, he started at an INA Bearing, helping with technical training, and then as an electrical design engineer for the automation department. And 5 years later, he joined JM Hubert and the engineering wood division, where he worked as a plant engineer and Six Sigma project manager. He holds a Bachelor of Industrial Engineering Technology from Utah State University, and with a strong background in industrial engineering and extensive experience in automation, Kurt is a dedicated professional contributed to the field's advancement. Welcome, Kurt. We're super happy to have you.
Thanks.
So without further ado, I will pass the mic on to you, Mathieu, for the next part of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Last week with Joe and Juan, we talked about what drives the adoption of automation in manufacturing plants. They talked about the labor shortage and the importance of upskilling your resources. And they talked about removing manual tasks that essentially add no value to your products. Today with Kurt from Bourns, we will provide you with some insight and recommendations on how to begin your automation journey and how to select your automation partner. So I'll get right into it. And Kurt, first of all, thank you very much for participating in this. I have a few questions for you, starting with, can you provide us with an overview of your current manufacturing processes? How does the plant work at Bourns and what it is that you do?
Yeah, Bourns Incorporated is a fairly large company, $1 billion company, 10,000 employees. We originally in Logan, back in the early 2000s, were pretty much producing small electronic components, trim pots and sensors. And they eventually moved all that manufacturing out of out of the country, mostly in Costa Rica and Taiwan. The what was left was the substrates that compose the inner workings of the electronic components, basically ceramics. So our facility is 50 employees, and we basically make powder into ceramic materials by pressing or rolling it in a flexible material and stamping or scoring it. And then we also use laser processes as well as heated kilns to fire the material. And pretty much everything we manufacture is white. And even the kiln furniture is white, and the kiln is white, and it's white everywhere. We do have other equipment that processes that. We have presses that run semi-automatic. We have a stamping process that's also semi-automatic, but it all ends up in the ovens. And we have 3 ovens, 2 periodic kilns that take about 3 days for the product to cure, and then there's a continuous one that runs through in about 2 hours. And all of our product for testing has to run through that the 2-hour one for QA to examine and verify that it's within spec. The other ones take about 3 days. So
Very good.
that's the nickel and dime. Now, as far as using automation and the other parts of the manufacturing, because everything is there's semi-precision in this operation, it requires special stacking and packaging and inspecting and measuring and things like that. And that's where the automation part of this component. I was hired a little over 2 years ago, and was excited because they had talked about automation opportunities in the building. And then my boss mentioned to me sometime later that he wants me to mainly focus on automation projects, and that's how we ended up meeting you guys at Vention. So
very good. Very good. Well, great segue for my next question. I want to hear you about the challenges and the pain points that you're facing on your production line that makes you think about automation. Essentially, are you do you have projects that are ROI driven, or some others maybe that you just can't do manually anymore and just need to automate? What I call perennity projects. So, what are your pain points right now that make you think of automation?
yeah, immediately when I went on my first tour during my interview, I noticed many opportunities, and some of those have come to reality, and others are still on the to-do list. So there's a lot. The pain points are kind of interesting because we're a good team. We're a small group, 50 employees, and maybe 15 or 20 management people in different variety positions, but I'm the only automation engineer. So even though there's a need for and opportunities for automation to be applied, it's really important that you kind of let it kind of fester out. When there's a pain point, as you just mentioned, it's something that it's a bottleneck in the process, or it's a delicate process where handling with manipulating the parts with your hand could damage the product. There's a speed component as well, and so I've kind of allowed our team suggest which projects would be the most appropriate at this time. And having a lean background, they've asked me also to help head up the lean program, which always encapsulates cost savings and improvement. And one of the biggest aspects of an automation project is that you have to justify it. There's a lot of expensive capital that has to be invested, and you got to make sure that you pick the right product or the right project so that you don't just waste the company's money and end up failing. So really the pain point, and it comes right down to it, is really just deciding and taking the risk to go and apply that the projects that you want to work on. And there's constraints there because I'm a one man team, and I have to rely on other outside sources and things. So
speaking of which, are there specific processes or tasks you feel could benefit from automation the most? When we first met, you mentioned something about the danger of thinking automation is going to solve everything, and that you should take that into account when selecting your first project. So, any specific processes or tasks you're thinking of automating first, and why?
Yeah, let me give you an example. It'd probably be a better way to answer that question. There was, like I said, several ideas that came about. One was from the mechanical design engineer, the very first one we did, and it was an older process. But the problem was there was no, programmer or integrator like myself in house. So everything that was modified on the machine had to be done blindly because there was no programming support. The people who made the product or the project, the machine, they were no longer available, and so we took on that task to retrofit it with a new PLC and then the new operations that my coworker was wanting to do for a long time. And so it was a very successful project. And it really, what ended up happening is we went from a stacking method that allowed us to only put 6 parts on top of each other that went into the kiln. But there was this extra capacity where we could add even more, and ended up, we were able to stack 12 parts high. So in the process of adding the ability to monitor and maintain and program and work on the electrical side in-house, we were able to basically double the capacity of our kiln. And if you've seen these kilns, they're very large. They're 14, 15 feet by 15 feet, like a cube, and it takes a lot of gas to burn. And if you're not filling that kiln with the product, you're just burning gas and wasting money. So it essentially increased our throughput, and by like double capacity wise, and of course saved us money. So that investment initially was very minimal cost because we just had to buy some PLCs and some sensors and then work together in house.
And was that a essentially material handling project, or was there a process element to it? What I aim to talk about is sometimes if you have a manual process, automating it is not necessarily going to resolve your issue. So that needs to be taken into account when selecting a project. I understand that this one was definitely an easy ROI, but was it also, technically speaking, easy so that it's a quick success?
Oh my heck yeah! It went off pretty good. It was kind of hit the ground running for me because I hadn't been in automation for years, and I've always wanted to get back to it. So this is a great one to cut my teeth on. I really work well with a couple of my colleagues that are both engineers, mechanical engineers, and have very good proficiencies in designing mechanical devices and working through that. We partnered up very nicely. I guess if I was going to suggest something, if you're going to go down the route of automating something in-house, is that you have some good mechanical support. It can be costly. I am fortunate because I have mechanical designers that design in AutoCAD systems, as well as a machine shop that can make the specialty tooling, because I deal with mostly off-the-shelf components, but when it comes to the mechanical operations, it requires a tremendous amount of support on the design, mechanical and machine side. And machining can really cost you a lot of money, where we have it in house. It's not quite as big of financial burden to us.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I remember from our first conversation that when you're selecting an automation project, you mentioned that with regards to process, if you have issues in your process, automation might not solve it alone. And you said automation doesn't absolve your sins from the past; it magnifies them.
absolutely.
So I really enjoyed that one, because whenever you're doing process and trying to automate it, there might be some changes required in order to make it automatable, in comparison to material handling, which focuses more on so easy processes that are repeatable and that don't add value to the product that you're making. Oftentimes, those tasks are preferable to automate at the beginning of your automation journey. Once you've selected a project, so everybody agrees that you're going to get the bang for the buck, and that everybody agrees that this is what we should focus the attention on. Moving on to the next question, when selecting those automation projects, how do you proceed at Bourns?
Yeah, it's still kind of ongoing evolutionarily wise, because I'm starting, kind of back at it. But I didn't look. It's like riding a bike. I got back on it, and it's something I really enjoy. So that wasn't too difficult. But there is always learning to be done. You just got to make sure you understand all the components of an automation project. Once you've already, and we've mentioned this before, and I just want to keep emphasizing how important it is that you select appropriate project that is the biggest bang for your buck for your facility, and that you are complete buy-in from the team, because you don't want to, if there's a failure or an oversight, you don't want to be the only one that gets blamed for the delay or the going over budget, or that it may not work at all. And that's the reason why the fact is you can't, if you got a process that's out of control, even though you may all want to do it, that's be a real showstopper right out of the gate, because you don't want to go into something that, if you can't control it, that suddenly the machine magically is going to fix the problem. If you've got a good control of the process, and then that fits nicely into an automation project. But at that point, once you've got it approved, you got the money approved and everything, just make sure you understand all critical aspects of it, and just try to keep in a high level view. Because if you're like me, you're in a spot where you don't have multiple people on your team doing the project. It's kind of you. So you got to make sure you understand all the key steps and the key areas. And if I was just to break it down simply, it's, you have the electrical side, and that's your everything from wiring to electrical design to the layout of that part of it. You also have the mechanical side, and that's where Vention, you've really helped us, then you also have the components as well. But then you have the mechanical design portion, and you've helped us with that, as on helping us design cabinets and basic processes, which I could conceive in my mind, but you guys helped me get it to reality. So those just make sure you understand all aspects of your project, so that you don't just get into one and then you forget to manage another one that's really important.
So I hear two things. I hear make sure that you're automating something that you already control, and bring in all the stakeholders possible, whether internal or external. Sort of reminds me, for the internal stakeholders, reminds me of what Juan was saying last week about one of the reasons to automate has to do with the resource shortage, right? And one of the reasons to automate is to give them opportunities for meaningful responsibilities and opportunities to upskill. So bring in stakeholders from all levels of the organization, whether it's the CFO that wants to understand what's his ROI, but also production floor on how that's going to impact positively their day-to-day life. We mentioned it briefly, but I want to hear you talk about risks and concerns to anticipate when implementing automation in your processes. What I mean by that is what can and typically does go wrong in automation project. Um, I want to hear your stories. I'm sure that you have some stories to share about that.
Yeah, one in particular, just one we're still trying to finish up. In fact, you guys helped us build the I guess, for lack of a better word, the cabinet for it, or the structure to hold the machine on. That was one of our first purchases from you guys, but a fairly simple operation was just to measure the height of these tubes. But as we went into this project, we had different, very clearly defined deliverables, of everything from storing the data to retrieving the data to visually seeing, how you the part is being measured, to the whole works. And we purchased a $15,000 digital micrometer to perform the operation. And after we had delivered everything, I mean everything, to what we had promised, and it was a good feeling, we ended up one little oversight. And that's, you think about a boat out in the ocean, it doesn't take a big hole for it to sink. And that's what you have to remember in your automation. You're building a machine that's never been built before, doing something that may never have been automated, or if it has, it's similar to the other things, but it's still a prototype, and it is out in the water under all the scrutiny and all the pressures and all the extreme environment, and it has to stay afloat, and it has to stay afloat for a long time. And that's pretty impressive when you consider how much engineers it takes to build a car, and how many years of development it takes. And you want to do this when in 6 months, 3 months, a year. It's pretty impressive that you have to get in and figure it out. Well, we got to that point, we were out in the water floating, and found I wouldn't say it was a show stopping hole, but it was big enough that we had to pull her back in and retrofit the sensor, remove that sensor, and try a different approach. And it was just a simple oversight. And that's something that is going to happen to you, unfortunately, almost every time you're in an automation project. I'm not saying be afraid of it. You've got to be daring and get out there and have fun and make an experience out of it. And you're going to have to, your failures are right there in your face. But one thing I like about automation is when you get it working and you see it performing the function that you told it to perform over and over and over, and accurately and repeatably, there's a great feeling, because every time I walk in the building, it's complimenting me for, my work in it. I don't have to get it from every outside sources. I can just go to my machinery, and and the fact that it's working is a reward for doing the project. So
Yeah, I hear you. I often say that if you're doing an automation project, that's R&D, right? If you don't fail at least once, you're not doing R&D. You're doing production.
yep.
That machine didn't exist on planet Earth before you invented it. Chances are you're not going to get it first shot. So do anticipate some hiccups. They're natural when trying to automate something, and there's not a machine available off the shelf that's already productized for your process.
Yeah.
And how, Kurt, do you go about how do you go about mitigating those risks? We talked about bringing the right people in. What's important for you internally? Who do you need the buy-in from, and maybe externally as well? What kind of partner are you looking for?
Well, I'm always looking for second opinions, people to critique. I've always been in that environment where there's plenty of naysayers around me, and so I expect and want and welcome and invite that kind of input. Communication is critical. That they see that you're progressing. They see that they see the challenges you're having. You're communicating them on a regular basis to your to your stakeholders, or especially to your local, fellow colleagues, management and others, production, that they know and they can provide input. In fact, the display you're seeing behind me, it's on a double hinge system that was completely designed because of a request from the production manager, that she wanted it so that she could swivel it, all the way around the corner of the machine, so that they could see it from two different points. And so I've had to figure out how to make it a flex hose and make it work. As you can see, we're making some progress with it. So I think that's how you mitigate, by communicating. And
what do you look for in the partner with whom you work? Obviously, we worked together on that, but what made the relationship worthwhile for your context?
Well, wow. I mean, I would never have been able to come anywhere close to the design that you provided, or the solution you guys provided for us. Even in house, we would have struggled with the structure, and I think we would have been still. It would have created an additional challenges, and issues that we probably wouldn't have seen. Your expertise in building this is, we leaned on it, and we were able to provide a clear vision of what we wanted. And then from that, you gave us a 3D rendering of what we were going to get, and it provided all the solutions we needed. And then the cool thing I want to mention is that, where you're dealing with kind of an erector set type material, the 80/20 material, if you will, it has so much flexibility that when we finished it, any little small minor tweaks or adjustments were done fairly easily. And because it's so robust and stout and good looking stuff, I think it's impressive when you see it. Yeah. It looks professionally built. So I feel it's exciting to be part of that, and you're part of our team with that as well.
I think it might be interesting to mention that one of the areas where Vention differentiates itself from a typical way of working is that we design everything in Machine Builder prior to moving ahead with the purchase of the equipment, because we build our projects out of our products, including the blue extrusions that we see behind you, but also all of the automation components. We design everything, and then you look at the price and say, yep, that's what I want. And then you commit on a PO. So thank you for that, Kurt. I'll try and summarize this before moving to the Q&A section. So in order to select your first automation project, I believe it's important to understand your process. Don't expect that automation is going to solve everything. Identify opportunities to start with successful deployment, successful for your employees, successful for your CFO, successful for your engineering team that needs to shine. And as a closing statement, I'm going to use a baseball analogy. For your first few projects, I strongly recommend you bat for 1,000 before raising the risk bar and taking on some more challenges, such as automating some of your processes. Thank you so much, Kurt. Appreciate that very much. Stick around for the Q&A question. Okay. Sophie, I guess back to you at this point.
Yes, thank you so much, Mathieu. Back to me, as you said. So everybody, the Q&A, as it has been open in the webinar, just a reminder that it's still open. We had 2 questions that came in during the webinar. I think one sort of already got answered, but we will look at the second one. This doesn't specify for which industry, so I would say let's keep it general. Maybe for you, Matt, can you give an example of an automation project or of automation projects that are low risk?
Yeah, well, I briefly mentioned it, but low risk means maybe your application has been productized already. It's a process that the market already has a out-of-the-box solution for it. Palletizing is a good example of that. Many of the palletizing projects, and I should know, I did that for many years, do represent a lot of process challenge. But if your specific application fits within what's available on the market and it's been productized, Vention has some of those productized solutions within certain parameters. It's pretty much out of the box. So if your process has a productized solution to it, that is low risk. When it comes to a process that requires an R&D project, the machine doesn't exist on planet Earth. Somebody's going to have to invent it. I strongly recommend looking at repeatable material handling tasks. A repeatable meaning the process is standardized, the dimensions are known, and hopefully it's a task that adds no value to your product. So basically just a cost. So there's an ROI value to it, but from a risk perspective, moving stuff around with automation is as easy as it can get. Whether you use a robot for it, collaborative robot for slow paces and low loads, or industrial, or just hard automation, conveyance, pushers, elevators, stuff like that. This is solutions that are well understood and very mature on the market. There's easy designs to make there, so low process risk. Or if you have a process solution, go with productize something.
Very good. Thank you for that answer, Matt. The next one is for you, Kurt, from Mason Hudson. Thank you for your question. The question is, can you discuss how you typically come to the decision to attempt an automation project in-house versus taking it to an integrator to help find a solution?
Yeah, just tie in a little bit with what Matt said. It's got to be something that is a pretty standard way of manufacturing or processing, something that it's been done in the past, especially if you're starting out. And there's a lot of that. You can look it up. I mean, conveying, palletizing, packaging, some basic assembly. Everyone, even some of the basic steps, however, can be difficult to develop and implement as far as knowing how to do it. The one I'm working on now is, and it's an inspection and a packaging machine. In that, just that simple, just simply put, it sounds easy, but as you dive into it, you've got to have some creative juices flowing, and you got to have a lot of people to throw out the ideas, and you got to work through them, and you've got to have that vision and see if you can make it turn into something, accomplish the objective that you've been trying to achieve. And if you don't feel like you're comfortable with it, you can do several different options, and one would be going out and finding an integrator to either assist you or to help you with that. And that's where Vention was such a shoe fit for me, because I needed certain applications that I couldn't do my own. And so being able to meet with Vention and have them put together, a fairly decent sized standalone machine, was invaluable to me, and the fact that I could tell them, this is what I thought was kind of cool, because I had, a dozen different ideas of how to perform this function. But when it came right down to it, at the end, it kind of, like, after talking it over, the idea come to my mind, and I'm like, okay, that's going to really work. And I believed in it, and I had a vision that it would work that way. And then when I shared it with Vention, they were able to create the fixturing and at least the basic tooling to make it operate that way. I'm still going to be adding specialty tools that have to be machined, but that partnership was invaluable to me.
That makes sense. Amazing. Thank you so much for that answer, and thank you for that question, Mason. We have a question from Theo. When starting an automation project, do you recommend starting small and keep adding automation to the process, or simply go as far as you can without taking too much risk? That's a little bit in
So,
regards to what Matt said earlier, but curious to hear your thoughts.
well, keep it simple, stupid is my philosophy in automation. As I've gotten here, I really want, I'm a little more veteran at, been around the block a few times, and I know that, that ambitious excitement that you've got to parse it out and say, this is really, I can get excited about this vision that I have, but I've got to keep it within the scope and the realm of reality and achievability. The tendency is to, oh, I've got this really cool project and I'm going to add all these bells and whistles and all this, and every time you add a bell or whistle, it's going to add an extra challenges of the programming part of it and the integration part of it and the monitoring and the maintenance of that additional tool. If it was me, I would start out with no display. I would start out with no HMI. I'd be the cheapest, simplest PLC I could find, and it would perform 2 or 3 simple function steps. And when you've proven that you can perform that operation, then widen it out, and add small incremental embellishments or bells or whistles to it, because that's what will kill you in the end. The easiest part of as my position is making the program. I mean, I can knock out a program in a couple of days. It's all the diagnostics. Now I've got, instead of having just 2 sensors, I have 5. And now I got to monitor each one and the different conditions and all that has to be monitored. So if the thing, crashes, then I can, tell the operator what the problem was. So just remember, keep it simple and start out simple, and then incrementally extend your proficiencies and try new things. Otherwise, you'll bury you.
And along the same lines of the "keep it simple, stupid" phrase, one of my favorite phrases is when you're doing an R&D project, fail as fast as possible. You will be failing. And that's where solutions like Vention come into play, where all the project is designed with parts, whether structural or automation related, from our inventory of parts. And so all of that, including a controller, you briefly mentioned, Kurt, the PLC, which is the controller part of it. Machine Motion is our version of a PLC at Vention. We've got those off the shelf, right? So if you want to program something, set up a machine on site to automate something, you're in a position to fail as fast as possible. I would say that I typically only say that to engineers, because otherwise it sounds bad from a salesy perspective. But fail as fast as possible is something that's totally enabled with the platform from Vention, whether you're designing with Machine Builder or program on Machine Motion. That stuff is off the shelf and ready on your floor within a few days, right? So fail as fast as possible, keep it simple. So to answer Theo's question specifically, I think start small and build rather than shoot for the moon and miss it.
Yep, absolutely.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much to both of you for these answers. This is how we're going to wrap up the webinar for today. And for everybody on the call, thank you so much for attending. We will have the next episode 3 of our webinar series, airing next week on February 9th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, with Étienne Lacroix, CEO of Vention, as well as Brandon Bond from Actemium. So again, thanks again for joining, and we will see you next week in the next episode. Have a good day.
Have a good day, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thanks.